In this episode of the Geodatabase talk, we will discuss archiving. But before we jump into this podcast, if you're new to this channel or podcast, consider subscribing. I talk about GIS in general, Geographic Information System. I talk about software engineering topics. I have a lot of series and shows in my YouTube channel and on this podcast that I discuss. Basically, there are software talk where I pick a topic in the software engineering realm and talk about it. There are GIS topic tutorials, coding tutorials. I have a lot of other series, so check out those content and I'm gonna see you there. What's up, y'all? This is Hussein Nasser from iGeometry Podcast, and welcome to another Geodatabase talk. This topic is about archiving. What is archiving? Let's start with that, guys. So, archiving is the idea of as you start editing your data in your geodatabase specifically, you start keeping historical thing. You never delete or physically remove work that you have put into your geodatabase. If you create a feature, right, if you then deleted it, the geodatabase keeps track of that, and you can go back in time and look how it behaves, or what is the state of a feature or a collection of features back in time. You cannot edit it, you cannot change the past, but you can normally read from it and do analytics on that. With that said, so that's archiving in general, right? So that's just very basic definition. But in the geodatabase, to enable archiving, there are three modes that you can do. Right, there are three different configuration to enable archiving in your geodatabase. The first one is when you first create a feature class on your geodatabase. That is obviously enterprise geodatabase. Archiving is not enabled on other stuff, other other platforms, only in the enterprise geodatabase. That's things that are built on top of a DBMS essentially. So you would create a feature class by default. We talked about this. It's unversioned, has nothing to do, has no versioning capability or anything. You can enable archiving on that class, and just by doing that, as you start creating feature and edit that, you will get the ability to start timestamping every single row. The ArcGIS platform adds fields to your table to keep track of what's going on there. Right? Oh, is this feature deleted? When was the last time it touched? And all that stuff. So every insert becomes an insert. Every delete becomes essentially an update and an insert. Every update becomes an insert. So that's why you can go back in time and see how a feature, or how like a month ago, how your network or how your data looked like right at that time. So that's one way to do it, right? So if you do it so this is just archiving, right? Pure archiving, no versioning. So you don't get the ability to create a nice high isolation, right? And we talked about high isolation in another episode, right? So another way is you would enable register your dataset as version. Let's talk about traditional versioning here. And then you have the ability to also enable archiving. So not only you'll get versioning, you'll also get archiving with your versioning, right? So that's a little bit more overhead on your data, right? So the geodatabase will need to do a little bit more work to just create a feature, especially if you're on a version. Right? But you can look back at your at your data. I keep saying network because I work with the utility network. You can look back at your data and see how it behaves like a month from now, right? And so on. The third type of archiving that you can enable on your geodatabase is the branch versioning. That's the new service-based modeling. And ESRI developed this new versioning model as a replacement of the old one to combine both versioning and archiving in one. And as a one thing. So if you create a feature class and register it as branch version, then you would by default get versioning and by default get archiving, right? You don't have an option to opt out of one of those. You get both for free, essentially, by just enabling that branch versioning on your class. So branch versioning, you have to publish it as a feature service, and you have to enable the version management service. We're going to talk about it in maybe in another episode. But once you do that and you start editing through your service, you'll have the ability to keep track of your features as well by default, right? Because when you enable branch versioning, there are like a list of requirements that you have. You should add global IDs, you should add editor tracking, and so on. So there you have it, guys. Archiving. 3 ways to do archiving in the ArcGIS Geodatabase. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you have more questions, tweet me, or can you say tweet me? I keep saying tweet me. Tweet at me. All right. Okay. Or you can just comment on LinkedIn. If you're listening from LinkedIn, if you're listening from YouTube, you can comment. Right. I'm available. Send me an email. All your questions are great. This episode is there because it's an answer to a question that you guys ask. So I'm gonna see you on the next one. You guys stay awesome.
The podcast you just heard was published with Anchor. Got something you want to say to the creator of this show? Send them a voice message using the Anchor app, free for iOS and Android.